Hey, Bun Bun.
Okay, you're live. I'm going to give a couple minutes for everything to kind of gear up here. This is exciting, though. This is the first time I've tried to do a consistent live show, basically ever, which is a little surprising, especially considering I've been home for quarantine for, 4 months. And I could do with a little structure in my life. That is for darn sure. Oh, that was weird. Okay. So yeah, it's Wednesday. It is the second Wednesday of July. Last weekend was the 4th, and so things here have finally started to kind of quiet down a little bit. I have spent the last couple of weeks just fighting the urge to be like, just because you can shoot off fireworks doesn't mean you should, because, everyone is terrible. Technically, big commercial fireworks are not allowed in Minnesota for residential areas, and it basically is a law that doesn't matter because Wisconsin sells them on the cheap. And everyone this year seems to have taken celebrate at home as shoot off commercial grade fireworks in your backyard, which is great for me and the cats. We're halfway through the week, which is good. I've been needing that benchmark to be met since, Monday morning. It's been not actually that bad of a week. I had a really good reading week last week. And I haven't been up on it so much this week, but it has been like I've been riding that wave a little bit, and it's not bad. I did yesterday finish up one sock. This is a chevron sock. Let's see if I can flatten it out and show. Chevrons. And so now I am working on the second so that I don't just wind up with a bunch of mismatched socks, which would be very Brie, admittedly. Okay, let's go ahead and tweet out the link to this on the Twitter so people can know we're live. Anyway, let's see. Other things that have been going on. I spent most of today's after work time reading Ascender, which was super exciting. I have been waiting to read that forever now, or what feels like forever. And I'm going to be trying after this. I'm trying actually right now to do two things with the rest of my night. The first is to update my Storygraph profile so that it's actually reflective of the things that I've been doing. And then I have all of the comics. These have all been sitting in a stack on my coffee table waiting for me and glaring at me in, whatever a book glare looks like. I think we all know that feeling. It's been doing that for me. Let's see. Get all my stuff here together. So yeah, I wanted to talk about a couple of things today. The first one is kind of some of the J.K. Rowling stuff, not because I'm particularly interested in rehashing her transphobia, mostly because I'm very interested in the idea that all of these people are kind of protesting by not reading or purchasing her things right now, and I'm finding that to be a really interesting dynamic. I have long believed in not buying from people who are, bigots, and have been trying to really be good about that in my own life. And so it's kind of fun and nice to see other people doing that. But I have, conflicted feelings because something about no ethical consumption and capitalism. And then the other thing that I have been really wanting to kind of dive into is just kind of some of the I don't want to call them coronavirus feels, But I've definitely wanted to talk about the ways that just traditional reading has not been working for me this year. And it's really been sucky. And I know that that's basically everybody's experience right now. I know everybody's kind of just like, at least from my side of talking to things in my friend groups, everyone is struggling. And it's not surprising, but I've been having just this like overwhelming guilt about the fact that I'm not doing anything. By the way, if you hear giant metal crashing sounds right now, it is because Bunny is allowed to be out of his cage. He kind of has free reign of this spare room, and so he might be bouncing about. And yes, I've been thinking about doing a video on ethical consumption and how to avoid purchasing or giving money to shitty people. But I'm trying to figure out a way to do that without being just a super downer of a person, because that's what that whole topic makes me feel like. But also I have been ranting and raving about it to my partner, so maybe the internet should hear about it instead of him for a change. Just how things probably could go. He might appreciate that. But yeah, so Bunny's out. You might hear some cats scratching at the door because I have just cruelly locked them out. Yeah, let's talk about, I had my copy of Ascender. I probably left it in the coffee table. I got Ascender Volume 1, and I'm so happy. I am so happy. I have been waiting for this, like, I know they're on Volume 2 of the comic. I have been waiting for this for what feels like forever. So it's the first trade volume of the follow-up to Descender by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen. The first followed this little robot boy and this kind of ragtag crew of his friends and family as they face what's essentially a robot apocalypse and the fallout of that. And this one picks up, I don't know, 15 years later, probably. And it follows this little girl who has found Bandit, who is the robot dog. And I'm so happy. I couldn't get it for the life of me throughout all of COVID. And I have been checking literally since I was told that the trade was coming out, since its release date, at my local comic shop. Finally, I braved going out into the plague lands with mask and appropriate precautions, and finally found a copy on the shelf after something like 5-6 months of trying to get it. I tried even special ordering it from them, and they never emailed me back to say it was in stock, which was incredibly frustrating. I read it. I finished it today in one sitting. It's fantastic. I'm super looking forward to Volume 2. They didn't have Volume 2 when they went out. I know it is released. I know Rachel has picked it up, but my experience is that science fiction writers and robotic engineers are two different camps. We got to acknowledge that in the fiction. I think that's supposed to be. And yeah, no, there's definitely a very distinct approach to AI between when science fiction authors talk about it and when actual scientists talk about it. And I think part of that is because the conception of what is artificial intelligence when you're working from kind of this basic science level up is so different, right? Because technically we would classify something like Siri as an artificial intelligence because she learns and adapts and does things like that. But the capacity is so limited in many ways. Whereas in, of course, science fiction, what we're actually talking about is the rise of sentience. And what does that mean when it's outside of our control? Robots are just the stand-in, essentially, for something we can't control. And so, you know, the fears abound there in a way that they would not in, I guess, computer science and robotic engineering. It's a beautiful comic. It features Dustin Nguyen's watercolors. and those are outstanding. I follow him on Instagram as well because I fell in love with his work. And then the other thing that I wound up finishing today, because I was like, I think I'm just going to spend some time reading comics, was, I think it's volume 8 of Giant Days, which is just always a treat. It's like 3 ragtag friends in college trying to figure their shit out. And it's just a lovely little side venture. I don't know. That is the 2 that I have finished, but I've been listening to audiobooks a lot, and that's been great to be able to do that while I knit. The big audiobook I listened to was Mexican Gothic. And can we talk about how that's on the best sellers list right now? That's a whole thing, is that Silvia Moreno Garcia's Mexican Gothic is, I think it's in the top 10 right now on the best sellers list. And it it is ranking higher than American Dirt, which is one, fitting, but also a little bit of a lovely Schadenfreude moment. Mexican Gothic is fantastic, and I'm planning actually on doing a full review of that. But it is a creepy ghost story, and there are mushrooms in it, and I love that. One of my favorite things is reading about mushrooms and learning about them, and like I have mushroom spores grow in the backyard and like different varieties and things like that, which is very on brand for me. But it was a joy to see both something a little bit spooky and also mushroomy. And yes, the words Mexican and Gothic together are awesome. I loved it. If you haven't read anything by Silvia Moreno Garcia, I know people generally start with Signal to Noise. I think this would be a really good one to start with. I wasn't such a fan of Beautiful Ones, which came out a good couple of years ago and is actually, I think, just being re-released by Tor. Tor's had a lot of announcements coming out in the last couple weeks. Speaking of which, today they did announce that Ernest Cline is doing Ready Player 2, which I have feels about. Not a lot of them are positive feels. I know people love Ready Player 1. That's fine. You do you. I just think it is. It's the kind of nostalgia bait that just constantly like irks me a little bit, because it's used in so many ways to mask like the narrative structure's lack of integrity. Well, and I don't mean like ethical integrity, just that its structure is kind of poorly built. But we wrapped it up in mechs and arcade games. And so, you know, admittedly, I did, I've read it and I listened to the audiobook, and Will Wheaton, I think, does a fantastic job. His voice is like, to me, his voice is the voice of 80s boy. And so like, it was just very fitting. But yeah, I was like, who asked for this? And the answer is the movie adaptation made a shit ton of money, and his last book was a flop. So go back to what you know. And I guess I can't really blame anyone for doing that. I was like, did you really think there was more story here? Because I didn't. But again, not to sound like a judgy brat. I'm just being a judgy brat. I'm not over Mexican Gothic. I'm starting Descendant of the Crane, but I know that it's just going to be like, it is just such a different vibe. And Mexican Gothic is like this beautiful, like 30s, just so good. 30s creepy, kind of a classic horror feel. Most of the story takes place in like this decrepit old like manor house, which is, the vibes on that, I'm feeling them. And part of that is also that like that's just a setting I adore. I adore the like creepy, maybe this house is haunted, but also maybe these women are crazy thing. I don't know what that says about me. I should take some time considering I just did that ramble about horror to think about what my horror tastes say about me. I don't know. And then I'm trying to think about what else is new. I did find out, I've been doing my Storygraph. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about. So I have been on Storygraph. Let's see here. I'm going to bring it up because my plan had initially been to look through Storygraph as I was doing this. Storygraph is like a new beta for a substitute for Goodreads. It is apparently offline for maintenance right now. That's okay. And I've been really enjoying trying to figure out some of the features. And I found out today, fun fact, you can block certain authors' works from showing up in your recommendeds, which is fantastic. Not only because some people I just don't like, but also some people just are authors who I will never buy from, you know, the Orson Scott Cards of the world. And I just was like, oh, I never have to see that? That's fantastic. If only Amazon would get that picture. I am also, though, trying not to purchase anything off of Amazon that I don't absolutely have to. Because, you know, something about voting with your dollar, that in of itself is a whole, like I said, it's a whole thing. But if you guys have any suggestions for bookstores, especially indie science fiction and fantasy bookstores, I am trying to put together a little quick list that I can put out into the world. I have a couple. The one that I've been going to, or the science fiction and fantasy bookstore that I've always gone to was Uncle Hugo's Science Fiction Bookstore, which was this like 50-year-old bookstore run by these two kind of grumpy looking old dudes with their dog. It was a fantastic little bookstore. Like, you could not walk through the aisles without tripping over just a gigantic pile of books the size of a 4-year-old. And they had all sorts of old retro paperbacks and things like that available that just you wouldn't find anywhere. That store burned down when rioting was going on. And so I've been looking for some replacements because what I couldn't find there was pretty few and far between as far as books go. So right now I've been switching over to Dreamhaven, which is a different science fiction and fantasy bookstore in the Twin Cities area. My partner actually likes them a little bit more because he's a big movie buff. I think I mentioned that here and there before. And they have a bunch of old horror movie paraphernalia, which he's super into. So he will actually go with me instead of how he would just kind of leave me alone in the tinderbox that was Uncle Hugo's. And then I found one the other day called Sista Sci-Fi that is a Black woman-owned science fiction bookstore, which is kind of fantastic. It says it's creating a community of doulas of Afrofuturism and Afro-mysticism centered on science fiction literature written by Black women, which is freaking fantastic. It's Sista with an H. I'm going to drop it in the comments, actually, the link to it for anybody who wants to check it out. So I'm trying to put together a list of places where you can buy right now that will ship to your house so that you don't have to leave, and also you don't have to buy from Amazon. So that is my little project, but it is surprisingly hard to find science fiction and fantasy focused bookstores that are reputable. You know, Twitter has been unveiling a lot of things lately that are not all fantastic. Anyway, Has anyone else been just feeling kind of cruddy whenever anyone puts out this TBR and then they're like, oh my God, I finished all my TBR books? Because I feel some guilt, admittedly. I have, in fact, stopped doing monthly TBRs almost altogether for the last couple months because I just can't bring myself to like read consistently. So here's hoping that some of these comics bring me out of that slump a little bit. I'm also going to start, I think, knocking out some lighthearted like romance and YA because I'm feeling like maybe those will be a little bit better paced for me. If you have recommendations for books that helped you, you should let me know. But right now I have 4 comics. Well, one is not quite a comic. Agony House is by Sherry Priest, who I've read a number of her books before, and it is a combo of like comic and story, like actual prose. It's published by Scholastic, and I saw it at the comic shop, and I couldn't help myself. It takes place in New Orleans in a rundown house. So again, me and the rundown houses. I like that. I have Bird Boy Volume 1, Eleanor and the Egret, which I don't know anything about, but admittedly, I picked it up because this is a lady in an amazing hat, and also there is an egret. And then Joyride volumes, I think I have 2, 3, and 4, which I picked all of them up on recommendation of a friend of mine who was in town, and we were shopping together months and months and months ago at this point, and have not yet picked them up. Well, I wish Storygraph was up because I was going to go in and do all my updating. Oh, here we go. Now it's up. I'm going to drop my Storygraph profile in like the link to it in the comments as well for anybody who's like slowly making the switch as well and who would like to be friends. Be my internet friend. But yeah, because apparently I have not been keeping up with Goodreads because all of this is out of date, which is not Storygraph's fault. They do an importing, so you can import all of your Goodreads data. And I just have been really bad about not keeping up with my Goodreads data. So that's a thing I have to fix. I'm also kind of just having fun exploring some of the ways that it breaks up your feed. So like there's a community feed that will have like all of the updates that people have for what they're reading, and it separates that from like your own book reading and finding books in a way that I think is a little bit more intuitive than Goodreads, which I just find really, really cluttered. But right now, let's see, it is suggesting to me The Future of Another Timeline, Dream Snake by Vonda McIntyre, The Lesson, Rocannon's World by Ursula Le Guin, which I actually haven't read, The City We Became, The City in the Middle of the Night, a bunch of stuff, Rosewater, which I have read, some new stuff by Levi Tidar and Mieville. So it hasn't been super off so far. I'm just trying to get it to actually get rid of card from my suggestions because I don't have time for that, man. I also don't think it has realized that I really, really want or I really like nonfiction, like science nonfiction. So Natalie, I do raise both chickens and quail. I have 3 chickens in my backyard flock. I have about 1/10 of an acre in the middle of the city in St. Paul, so I can't have a huge one. I have a duck named Tennyson, and I have 5 quail. I started off the season with more than that, but you kind of have to cull down your males because they get loud if they are housed together, and I only have so much space. Just kind of a bummer, but also makes, you know, makes it quieter, and I prefer not to impose on my neighbors. And yeah, I really like it. I think actually my favorite is definitely the duck, which is not what I would have thought. I love having chickens because they're silly, but my duck was hand raised by this other lady who moved in, so they had to find a new home for the duck. She came with a name, which is Tennyson, which I love. And she used to, I guess, just spend hours sitting with this duck on her back porch writing. So my duck is super friendly and lovey, and she is just finally getting out of a broody phase. So that's when they want to sit on their nest and they get kind of cranky. So she has been in a much better mood lately. That has been one of the things that I have loved doing in the city, actually, more than most things. I have kind of a little bit of a petting zoo here. You know, all the chickens and the duck and the quail. Then I have Bun Bun the rabbit. His name is Byron. And I have my 2 cats, who are Soren after Kierkegaard and Wally after Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. The only thing wrong with Wally is, aside from her squished nose that makes her snort, is that I made the mistake of giving the vet and the groomer her full name. So every time I call in, I have to say Wollstonecraft, and they never seem to be able to like pronounce it, which is odd. So that's a thing. But I like having that much chaos in my house. My parents are perpetually confused about why I don't live in the middle of a more rural area. Yeah, Soren can be a little hard to spell, and especially if the only time you've ever seen it is with the 2 dots, like the umlaut over the O. But he is my sweetest cat. Wally was standoffish for really the first 2 years. We got her as a kitten. And she is finally settling in a little bit and wanting to be pet and be lazy. Before that, she was all zoomies and chasing shiny things. Okay, I'm looking at Sista Sci-Fi, and this has a fantastic shirt. I'm dropping it off for anybody who wants to see. Oh, that's my Storygraph link. Ignore that. Let me see if I can screen share really quick so everyone can see it.